Hello and welcome to the Jason Rantz Show, brought to you by the Novak team, powered by eXp Realty. Visit them online at meetthenovaks.com. Two things are clear right now in America. We have a surging crime crisis in Democrat-controlled cities, and the activists are doing what they can right now in order to deflect. They do that because progressive activists are responsible. The ones who screamed ACAB from Seattle to New York, the ones who pushed successfully to defund the police, and those who pressured and lobbied and paid for politicians to enact dangerous light-on-crime policies, they're the ones responsible for this surge. King County and Seattle are about to hit record numbers of homicides. King County right now is on track to set yet another record for criminal gun violence. At least 17 homicides with at least 70 shots so far this year. 70 people shot this year. The 10-year average of homicides in Seattle is just over 26, but this year we're at 19, and it shows no signs of ending. Progressives who push policies making this possible here and all across the country, they're not taking responsibility. The rise in crime is supposedly due to police?
I think that there are a lot of police unions and GOP operatives that would like for us to believe that this recent crime wave has everything to do with this idea of defunding the police. But guess what, Stephanie? The police haven't been defunded. You actually look at the 50 largest cities' law enforcement spending as a share of the general expenditure in each of those cities actually rose slightly from 13.6% to 13.7%.
Look, I'm no GOP operative nor a member of a union. I'm just a guy with a working pair of brain cells that knows how to discuss this issue without setting up straw man arguments. You're going to hear partisan hacks like that. Brittany Packnett Cunningham. She's going to start to shift the narrative. You're going to hear her and others claim that police budgets went up overall in order to change the debate. Defunding the police? What defunding? That didn't happen, we're told. She does this by including conservative-run cities that either didn't defund or smartly increase funding. You're going to hear claims that crime is happening all across the country, so it's not just, say, a Chicago problem.
Cities individually cannot tackle this problem on its own. We just cannot. In Chicago, we've done absolutely everything possible. And we need help from the federal government because this is a national problem.
The strategy of deflection is intentional and it's transparent. The crime wave is hitting cities that defunded police and instituted light-on-crime policies. Tampa and San Diego, for example, they increased their police budgets. They're also not in the news every single day for crime surges. However, let's look at the biggest budget cuts to police departments. They came from Austin, New York, Minneapolis, and Seattle. Tend to be in the news a lot. And you look at some of the policies on the books where even serious criminal suspects are released without any bail, or activists pay bail for the criminals. We are in a place where instead of punishing criminals, we offer them art therapy and restorative justice. Why not give them back massages at this point? What do all these have in common? All these cities. Crime surges. Who leads these cities? Progressives. And yet it's the police's fault?
So this rising crime is not the fault of the movement. It's actually the fault of the police. And this has been our point all along. Why should we keep funding systems and institutions that keep rendering themselves ineffective? We should be talking about gun control, livable wages, fair housing, education. That's where we should be moving the money to ensure truly safe streets.
Stephanie Ruhle, that whole time from MSNBC, smugly nodding her head from her secure studio, as if she knows the Democrat talking point she's feeding her 18 viewers happens to be the truth. It's not. In fact, left-wing anchors who push this same nonsense, they claim defunding and other progressive policies, they're not to blame. They say that from their secure home studios or their fortified studios surrounded by armed guards in New York City. In fact, speaking of New York City, let's take a look at a video from New York just last week. So that was the police's fault? Did you see any cops in that video? Maybe I missed it. City officials cut the New York City Police Department budget by $1 billion. It disbanded the plainclothes units, and officers are retiring early in droves. So what happened right after that? What happened afterward? An increase in crime. When you tell criminals you've gotten rid of plainclothes officers, guess what? Those criminals just might feel empowered to shoot people in public. When you don't have police officers able to proactively police or simply walk and drive and bike around the neighborhoods, guess what happens? Crimes occur more easily. When was the last time you saw a murder or a stabbing in full view of a uniformed police officer? You add that to the light on crime policies in these cities, and there is an explosion of violence. In Seattle and King County, for example, progressive judges seem to go through great lengths to keep criminals and other suspects out of jail. And then at the exact same time, you've got anti-bail activist groups like the Northwest Community Bail Fund. They're doing their best to bail out as many suspects out of jail as humanly possible. Let's look at a recent example. In late April, a homeless man named Michael Cedejo, he allegedly assaulted a 65-year-old man who was just taking pictures of City Hall Park. This is a huge and dangerous homeless encampment steps away from the King County Courthouse. It's gotten worse and worse and worse every single month. Cops weren't able to catch this guy after the alleged assault, but days later, the same guy allegedly attacked the same man yet again. This time, police were able to make an arrest. Now, at a court hearing, the prosecutor asked for high bail because, quote, based on the likelihood that the defendant may commit a violent offense. They knew he was dangerous. They believed he was dangerous. But the Northwest Community Bail Fund, guess what? They were there for Michael Cedejo. Take a look at this. The activist group paid his $5,000 bail. This is the bail slip provided to us by the King County Prosecutor's Office. They paid his bail because they don't believe suspects should stay in jail while they defend themselves. They say they fight for marginalized people so that we can prevent a possible injustice. There are activist groups out there that simply don't believe in the bail system, that it somehow perpetuates inequities. Aren't they heroes? They want you to believe that they're heroes, but let's be clear. Fighting to release violent suspects isn't some noble gesture fighting injustice. It's an extreme position, one that leads to people's death or injury. In fact, weeks after Cedejo's release on June 17th, again he was arrested at City Hall Park. This time it wasn't assault. This time he's accused of stabbing a man to death. He was arrested with a knife in his hand, according to the police. Now he claims it was self-defense, but here's what we know. If he wasn't released, this almost certainly couldn't have happened. A whole lot of issues are happening right now at once. I mean, just now we've barely covered them. But we do know there's a surge of violence, of crime, and we can tie it directly to progressive policies in Democratic-run cities. As is too often the case, when looking at the data, either locally or nationally, the communities impacted, guess what? Most of the time they're minority communities. In King County this year, the majority homicide victims were Black. Last year in Seattle, 49% of the homicides were against Black people. Black Seattleites represent only 7% of the population. In Portland, after they disbanded the city's gun violence reduction team, they saw a homicide rate that rose 800%. And again, the majority of the victims were Black. But police are to blame. Somehow police are to blame. Police violence against communities of color is statistically low. Doesn't mean they don't happen, it means they're statistically low. Crime against people of color from actual criminals, through the roof. And yet progressives ignore this. Progressives argue that policies that disproportionately impact people of color are racist. Okay, well that makes the defund movement racist, because we know that it's having a disproportionate impact on people of color. We have an easy fix. You can reverse course, refund the police, allow proactive policing, keep criminals in jail, and actually prosecute. 5 things. But these policies conflict with the current progressive agenda. So the question then becomes, when will these cities wake up and make the changes necessary to protect all of us? Hopefully they're going to act before it's too late.